Hello and welcome to Think Like a Game Designer. I'm your host, Justin Gary. In this podcast, I'll be having conversations with brilliant game designers from across the industry with a goal of finding universal principles that anyone can apply in their creative life. You could find episodes and more at thinklikeagamedesigner.com. In today's episode, I speak with Alliestrasza. Allie is a longtime streamer and influencer in the trading card game space. She started off making a living as a Hearthstone streamer for many, many years before she's transitioned to both making her own game in Play Alchemy and starting to promote Web3 games like Parallel. We talk a lot about a ton of really interesting aspects in terms of what it takes to be a successful streamer, in terms of what it takes to grow a community, in terms of how you can build communities and the upsides and downsides of Web3 gaming. Allie is just one of the most genuine people that I have been able to have on the podcast. We had not met before this, but I had heard great things about her, and she certainly delivered. There's a lot of really great insights, including some personal insights in terms of how you deal with criticism, how you can grow as someone who puts your work out there. Honestly, whether or not you care about TCGs or you care about Web3 at all, there's a lot of great insights in here that will 100% be applicable to you in your creative life. And that's exactly why I made this podcast, is to bring a variety of voices in to be able to help everyone contribute more, create more, grow more. And Allie really delivered here. So without any further ado, here is Alliestrasza. Hello and welcome. I'm here with Alliestrasza. Allie, it's awesome to finally get to chat with you.
I'm so happy to be here. I've heard amazing things about you, and yeah, let's get to it.
Yeah, likewise. I've I've been following a lot of your presence online, and you've kind of in a sense, like me, we've made a living from our love of trading card games and being in this space. We took a very different path, or slightly different path. So I'd love to just kind of give people a little bit of background on you. How did you kind of get into gaming? How did you get into this, making it more of a professional path? Like, take me to the Wayback Machine, how we got going.
Sure. Well, I've been a casual gamer my whole life, but it wasn't until my last semester of college that I got into card games. And so I would consider myself sort of a late bloomer, because I wasn't playing card games when Magic and stuff like that when I was 10 years old. So I found them in college with Hearthstone, and I was introduced to it through my husband now. And the story kind of goes that the first BlizzCon was on. He and his friends were watching it, and I just am kind of that person that doesn't like being in the room and not knowing what's going on. So I downloaded the game and basically just fell in love with it after that. And sort of the rest is history. I really, really love dragons. So the lore of, the dragon, Warcraft, Alliestrasza, that really piqued my interest. And then slowly but surely just sort of, wanted to make this whole persona out of it. And as I was graduating college, I started to learn about Twitch and live streaming. Never really wanted to do something that normal. I love entertaining people. And when I, found out about this, possibility of making live streaming a career, I basically made a PowerPoint presentation to my parents and said, look, I'm going to try to be a streamer for 6 months. And if I see some success, I'll keep going. And if not, then I'll work in marketing and advertising, which is what I studied. And it worked. And here I am about 9 years later. So almost a decade of content creation for card games. So that's the short version there.
All right, love it. I'm going to unpack a bunch here because there's a few key moments, and I love to always just sort of learn more about you and learn more about the kind of traits and lessons and approaches that tend to give people more chance of success here and getting into the space. One, PowerPoint presentation for your parents. Walk me through this one a little bit, because I'll give you some time, because for me, when I dropped out of law school to make a living playing games.
Oh, I love
and
that.
My parents were not happy, right? I mean, literally my mom was crying and was trying to do everything in her power to try to convince me to go back to law school. But I wasn't, I had no PowerPoint. I just said, hey, I'm just doing this thing. And that was a tough spot. So maybe I should have had a PowerPoint. Maybe I wouldn't have had so many tears. So talk to me about the relationship is like with your parents. Like, what made you decide? Like, was there like a giant like projection screen? Did you sit
No,
them down? Was it? Well, I want to know what this
I,
PowerPoint. Yeah, walk me through this.
I must have been in a studious mindset because I was, graduating college. But it basically was printed out articles from, I think there was a Forbes article where it was like, people are making a living off of video games now, like one of those early articles. And this was probably, I guess this was 2015, because I graduated in the fall of 2015. So when I say PowerPoint presentation, it's probably not as crazy as like projector on the screen and like bullet points, but it was a
Little laser
collection.
pointer, you know.
Yeah, with laser pointer, no. It was just a collection of information of that was like, hey, this is actually a real thing. People are doing this. And I would say that both my parents were pretty supportive. My mom was maybe a little bit more like, I don't know. But my dad was actually a professional athlete. So he, had a trajectory that was in a similar vein. It's a tennis player. And so when Mason and I, my husband, kind of presented this idea to him, he was like, "Sure, go for it." And they were both very supportive. So I was, lucky to kind of have their support, but it was with a sort of time limit. Like if you can't see some success, then like you
Yeah.
need to go figure something else out. And yeah, that's sort of the I graduated December of 2015 and my first stream was February 1st, 2016. So I took basically a month to go move out to California, get my rig all set up. And then as February 1st hit, 9 to 5, 8 hours a day, 40, just treated it like a real full-time job. And then eventually got signed to a gaming team. And that one thing led to another. Blizzard discovered my stream. And then, I was able to join competitions that had a lot of visibility. And that's how it started.
Yeah. Yeah, I love this. And so there's a lot of like really key lessons here that I think I want to pull out, right? One is, as you mentioned, like this, you kind of glossed over, but I worked for 9 to 5. I took this as a
Mhm.
full-time job. I spent all the hours putting it in. I put in a lot of work to build that. A lot of people don't realize that that's what happens behind the scenes to make this, to make this come to life. And that's a really critical piece that I think is worth underscoring. And I love that you also built this with a kind of time horizon that says, hey, look, I'm going to try and run this experiment. And if it doesn't work within this time, I have a backup plan and I'm going to do that. And that's exactly how I've approached everything in my life as well, right? I took a year off between college and law school to go play Magic professionally. And that's when I had my most success and won the world championships and did everything because again, I took
Awesome.
it like a 9 to 5 job
Yep.
and then some. And then when I, dropped out of law school, I already had a job lined up. So I knew that I had something there. When I quit that job to start my company, I did exactly what you did, where it's like I got myself at the point it was a year. I had a year of savings. That if I can't make it happen after a year, then I'll go back and get another job and do the
So
thing, right? And
a,
yeah,
a similar trajectory, I would say there. Um, and I want to point out that, there when I started streaming, there were two viewers, or one of my friends. She would put my stream up on as many computers in her office, so I could get me to like 5, 6 viewers. And so I
aw,
really, started with no help from, another streamer that would host me and stuff like that. It was very humble beginnings of streaming to, 3 to 5 people for a couple weeks and then slowly got to 10 viewers to 15. When I hit 40 viewers, it was like, oh my gosh, like it was a big deal. So yeah, that's
yeah.
what.
And so what? And you kind of caught this at a key moment, right, when streaming was just starting to get really big too, right? It had maybe 3 or 4 years earlier than that. I think it really started to take off,
Yeah.
right? And so what do you not just obviously hard work is a big part of it, but what would you credit that success or growth with, or how would you potentially distill those principles for somebody who was trying to say, hey, I would like to get this a try. I wouldn't mind streaming for a living. Like that sounds awesome. What do you think determines kind of success or likelihood of success here?
Yeah, I think it's very different now. And it's funny, you mentioned like I got into streaming pretty early, but at the time it felt like I was getting into it super late, which obviously now I can see was not true. But in that time, consistency. I mean, again, it was just every day, 9 to 5. Eventually, and what I did was I posted a picture of myself playing Hearthstone on a plane and tagged Blizzard and did all the things, and that's actually the post that the community manager at the time discovered me. So I was at TwitchCon, and Molly, community manager at the time, Hearthstone, came up to me and she was like, "Hey, are you Allie?" And so it just one thing sort of led to another. It's consistency, but it's also making sure that you put yourself in as many places as possible to be discovered by the right people. I think nowadays, I don't think that you can just turn on the camera and stream, a crazy amount of hours and necessarily see the same success. The discoverability of Twitch is not great, and you really need to lean more into short form content, putting that your videos and short stuff like as many places as possible. I'm a little not, I don't know what the word is, but my faith in just live streaming is gone down just with the times. Like TikTok and YouTube shorts and that type of stuff is so crucial that you really need to expand your horizons just then, turning the camera on at this point.
Yeah, I think it's as true. It feels like across the board, right? In a sense, not just for streaming, but for game creation and any kind of
Mhm.
content creation and at all. Like it's easier than ever to make the things, and it's harder than ever to get like discovered and like get the attention on the things.
It is I think it is harder, but it's also easier in some capacity. Like I, do some research on discoverability and stuff like that. And, focusing in on like the content is now less about the individual and it's more about like the subject matter itself. So if you are a small creator trying to grow, like you really can see success by like focusing in on a niche and just like understanding what that audience wants. And platforms like TikTok, I maybe it's changing a little bit, but I do think that the discoverability is some of the best it has ever been because of the short form content. And then that, you take and tell your audience about like your stream and your actual YouTube channel with longer form content. But yeah, we all have to adjust to the changes of social media. And, with VR and all the AI and all the things that are coming, like who really knows what's happening next? I guess that's how I feel.
Yeah. Yeah, well, so there's a couple principles that I'll take. Maybe I'll reflect back from what I hear from you, and then I'll push back with some other ideas and see what you think.
Mhm.
So on the one hand, there's this idea of like there are some there's always going to be some new frontier, right? Of like what
Mhm.
the open space is, right? And where you can most make an impact. So finding a niche game, like maybe there's a new smaller game community and you could be one of the first people streaming it, and it's going to start slow just like everybody does, but then as that game grows, as that community grows, you're well
Yeah,
positioned to grow with it. And so that's like one opportunity. If it's not, short form content on TikTok, maybe just the hot thing right now, but maybe there's another version of that shows up, whatever the
for
next thing
sure.
is, the AI implanted into your brain chip versions. I don't know, whatever
Exactly.
whatever it is, right? So just keeping an eye on the trends on that space. That's kind of opportunities for people, and of course, just creating good content and getting good at creating good content for these different formats is a skill that you'll just continue to work on as you explore. Um, One thing I'll push back on, or I don't know if it's a pushback, but just kind of like from my experience, um, one of the most important things that I have found is to find a format that you actually enjoy, right?
Oh yeah,
Like this podcast, for example, right? Like I've been doing this now for like 5, 6 years, something like that. And I couldn't even imagine like if I were trying to make something like I don't know, to me, like trying to do like a, short form little posts is a lot more like painful in a sense. But here, like having a
sure.
deep dive conversation with somebody else in the industry about cool stuff about making games and content and all that, like I love this stuff. So to me, I would do this even if I, had no revenue from it. In fact, this podcast doesn't really make direct revenue. So I basically do. But it's something I
Yeah.
enjoy. And I think that makes a big impact because if you can stick with something over time, even if it's a crowded format, right? Starting a podcast in
Mhm.
2018 also felt super late.
True.
It's already, maybe too saturated, but it's something that I can do and post, couple it started off once a month, became every other week, and it just was something I just enjoyed, and we grew over time. And that ability to have like slow growth and be okay with that because you enjoy what you're doing, I feel like is a pretty key recipe for success.
Absolutely. I'm super happy you mentioned that. I've always said to people when they've asked me for advice on streaming, like if you're having a good time, your audience can see that you're having a good time. It's so important to actually love what you're doing, because that'll keep you going. So I think, in even in that case, though, like I think the ideal version is, we'll use the podcast for example. Um, you love this. This is your type of medium that you feel fulfilled doing. I think still, if you had an editor or something and took the best clips, like maybe you aren't necessarily in control of making the short form content, but you take your preferred, whether it's making YouTube videos or podcasts, and then you still somehow find a way to, clip up the best moments. And then that is sort of the promotion for the podcast. That's if you're like really trying to get as much growth as possible. But I absolutely agree with you. Like, you have to do what you love, and and consistency and passion, right? That's the
Yep.
winning combo.
100%. And then being able to repurpose the same content in
Yes.
multiple channels in multiple ways to reach multiple different audiences is absolutely the, a path to success. And we do that with this podcast. We have video clips and various other things that I don't make, but I'm
Yeah.
glad that they exist. And then, we talked about AI, like, so, AI is going to get better and better at this sort of thing. Like, it already is
Oh, yeah.
pretty impressive, where you can not use the AI to generate the core content, but you use the AI to create the clips and help bring things apart, create that many faceted approach. I think it makes it, again, easier to create this kind of content than ever.
Yeah, I'm definitely someone that, maybe this is a little controversial, but when it comes to things like new technology, like AI or blockchain, I'm very much in the camp of, let's figure out how to use it ethically, like in the best way, rather than pretending like it's not happening or it doesn't exist. And so I do think that AI is going to absolutely change the game. I mean, it already has with content creation. And so I'm of the opinion, let's not shun it. Let's figure out the best way to use it, and hopefully that will, give more people an opportunity to create content, because not everybody is an amazing artist or an editor or whatever it may be. So, but there's a fine line, of course.
Yeah, of course. And for anybody that wants a deeper dive into this, I have a podcast with Ethan Mollick, who's one of the top experts on AI. We talked very deeply about that process and like what the goods, the bads,
Oh,
and the
awesome.
ways to approach this. And because I'm like you, like I think that the potential of this technology is amazing. Even what's happening today is amazing. The risks are real. The
Mhm.
costs to artists and creators are real. Making sure that it's done ethically and that we find a way to kind of integrate this into society that doesn't destroy the things we
Yeah.
love, right? If it takes away the things we don't love, like my clipping this into smaller bite-sized chunks, and that can be done, fantastic. But if it's taking away the things of like, actually people's ability to create and make a living from doing things that they enjoy,
Sure.
then that's something we want to pay attention to. But that doesn't mean we should ignore it. And in fact, as a creator, it allows you and empowers you to do so much more if you're using it in the right sort of way. So I agree with you there.
I would love to listen to that podcast. So I'm gonna get the episode number after this and listen myself.
Yeah, I'll be happy to share it. I think, yeah, I mean, and I think you similar. I'm getting the vibe similar to me. Like, just I geek out on the new technologies, right? Like, we both have
Yeah,
gotten involved
totally.
in
Right.
like Web3 gaming, and we'll talk some about that for sure. But like this idea of like, what does that bring to the table? And even though there's a lot of people who are scared of it, or a lot of scammy things, or a lot of people that don't like it,
Yeah.
in fact, there's a ton of value to the technology and tons of like new frontiers to explore as a designer, as a creator, as a player, as just somebody who just enjoys these things. Like, I think that I've always just had a bias towards like, okay, what's the cool thing and how do we interact with it?
I'm right there with you. I think humans and technology have been evolving alongside each other, since the history of time. And it's not to say that the evolution could go wrong in some ways, but it's like it's up to humanity to sort of decide what happens with the tech, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. And then I've spent some time studying the history of technology, and like every single time there's a new revolution in technology, specifically when it comes to like communication and like our ability to collaborate together, there's always a crisis that comes with it, right? Like,
sure,
if let's
yeah,
go back to, obviously, the social media crisis is very, people are very, intent on right now, and increasing levels of depression and some
yeah,
problems that people have, and kind of people getting isolated into echo chambers. And that's something we're now adapting to. But like, go
mhm,
back further, right? television was TV's going to rot your brain and it's going to have centralized authority sending propaganda and commercials. And yes, some of that happened, but
Yeah,
also
true.
we adapted and we
Yep.
evolved. And the same, and if you go back further, when radio came out, people had the same things, and newspapers and even books. There's records of people who were complaining that when books came out, it would take away our ability to tell stories and connect to
Wow.
each other and we'll lose that part of our skill set. Right. So every single
Wow.
one of these revolutions has challenges. They're real challenges. We have to wrestle with them. We have to understand them, but they also come with incredible opportunities. And thus far, humanity's proven unbelievably resilient at evolving together. And I think gaming is a huge part of that, right? The ability to have online gaming communities, whether that be directly in an online game like World of Warcraft, where you're actually, interacting deeply with it, with other characters in the game, or games like Hearthstone and, Magic and Soulforge and all these other games where it's like where the interactions do happen in the game, but then there's this like community that builds up around it with streamers and Discord channels and everything. Like we build ourselves this community around things we love in a way that was like both impossible not that many years ago,
Yep.
and now actually can create like real like economic value and entire careers that nobody could have even dreamed. I mean, the idea of you being a professional streamer, even 20 years ago,
Yep.
let alone 30 years ago or more, is complete madness. Like the job didn't exist. So it's kind of cool to see that evolve.
Well said. Amen.
um,
Completely agree.
Yeah. Okay. So let's evolve now. So you started off as a Hearthstone streamer. You
Mhm.
got hooked on the game. You got hooked on the art and the story. You started your experiment. The experiment worked. You started getting discovered. You started getting some sponsorships.
Mhm.
What happens next? Because you're not the Hearthstone was only one part of the story, and you've created your own games. You're working with a bunch of other things. So how did this evolve from there?
Yeah, I mean, let's see. I pretty much full time Hearthstone for I would say 8.5 years. So it's really only been a recent thing that I've taken a step back from Hearthstone. And in that time, I did um, breaks. Like Hearthstone was certainly my main game. I played TFT. I had a little Magic Saga, for a while there when MTGA first came out. And yeah, I think the next evolution in my career, I suppose, happened when I did find Web3 gaming and blockchain, and so I feel on the subject that we just had about technology, I really care about playing a role in making sure that this technology is going in the right direction for gamers, because I definitely think that there are a lot of people taking advantage of the space, and so I understand that it's a risk to sort of like be a person standing up for it, and that's certainly come with its challenges for sure. But that
Preach.
was sort of yeah, preach. That sort of was a turning point, and I suppose that was in maybe 2021 that I started to get involved with um, other groups that were promoting certain games and learning about the whole space. And then yes, that did also lead to um making a Discord game. So the team is small, it's the four of us. It's Mason, my husband, and Joseph and Alex, some of our best friends. And yeah, we worked to make this Discord game, this RPG. And so my role is a little bit more on the lore side of things. I am the head of mysticism. So I was, in charge of sort of like coming up with the characters and the world building and all that good stuff. And we are still working on that now. And, it is meant to be sort of a community building tool that anyone can play in Discord, play Alchemy. And so, yeah, that's sort of been the journey thus far. And also, now I'm a podcast host of the Parallel League podcast because I've gotten very into casting the tournaments, more into the competitive scene. So, the majority of my career has been content creation and streamer, but I am trying to move a little bit more into hosting and being a sort of personality for Web3 gaming, but of course still streaming and making content as well. So sorry if that was a ramble, but that's
No, it's great. I mean, I love because it gives me tons of fun threads to pull on here, right? So you went from from streamer and for eight plus years to creator of like of a game, and that's not an easy jump, right? So what talk to me about that decision. Talk like, is it how has that gone? Like, it's, you said you've been doing that for about 3 years now. That's it's a decent chunk of time to be investing into making games, which obviously I'm passionate about also. And so I'm curious, like, what was the motivation behind that? What would you say is the elevator pitch of Play Alchemy specifically? And yeah, maybe we'll dig into that process.
Yeah, so we found that there was sort of a lack in community building tools outside of people's main game. Like in my community, we would host like poker nights and stuff like that, to sort of have this extra thing to, hang out with your audience or whatever. And so with the concept of Alchemy being a Discord game, it's like embedded right into Discord. So it's already incredibly social, right? And so the concept was also to like sort of showcase an easy path to getting people into Web3 gaming. Because when people play, there's no requirement that you needed to use any like crypto elements, but we did make a custodial wallet on the back end for people that if they wanted to go, export their assets to their wallet, that was possible. And so yeah, it's been a journey so far. It's been fun. We have a loyal community, and we're still trying to grow it. I was just recently in Manila for a parallel tournament, and we got to meet one of our like longtime supporters of Alchemy. So that was amazing just to see him in person. But we are continually working on making the game skinned for other communities. That's something that we do. And as well as our like idle staking game, Cosmic War, where basically there are different territories and you're trying to take everybody down at each week. And if you do, you earn our token spirit. And yeah, it's been fun. So and definitely a cool decision to sort of move into the development process as opposed to just playing games myself.
Yeah, it gives a different perspective on things, and obviously the skill sets feed into each other, right? Having an audience and being able to broadcast the game, knowing the needs
Mhm.
of streamers and the opportunities to fill that niche is valuable. And then as you learn more about what goes into game development, you get maybe a little bit more sympathy for the the games you might
Yeah,
criticize on stream
like I said,
otherwise.
absolutely. Again, I'm more on the like world building and the lore, but the tech and the game design, I have witnessed a lot of back and forth, and man, game design is hard. I'll say that. That's something that I've gotten to see now, and so I actually have a little bit more sympathy for companies, game devs, where things take time. Yeah, it seems hard, which I'm sure you're very very aware of.
Very, very aware of. Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, well, but again, that's part of why I have this podcast, right? Is to sort of demystify the process, to let people in behind the scenes as to like the challenges that come, right? I mean, Soulforge Fusion, for example, we're getting into the Web3 space. So Soulforge Fusion, we recently launched on Solana and our Web3 elements. Like we had all of the kind of classic hate from Web2 and our
Mhm.
tabletop players, because, it's also a tabletop game that scans into the digital account. And all of the challenges that came from building a new technology to digitally print cards, new technology to run this Web 2 version of the game, new technology to connect everything to Web 3. And every piece had challenges and bugs and hiccups and almost running out of cash and trying to manage the community and cater to everybody's interest. And it's an enormous amount of work. It's an enormous amount of, of challenges and uncertainties as you go through it. And again, like we talked about with streaming, it has to be something you really have a lot of passion about, right? So you clearly are
Absolutely.
passionate about the lore building and the world building you carry. You love that stuff. You're willing to go through the challenge and heartache of working through all of this technical and marketing and every piece of it that comes together to build something that you really can be proud of at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
So as we get into Web3, I realize we've dropped a few terms here that some of our audience won't understand, because we have a lot of tabletop players and Web2 players. We talked about, you mentioned, kind of dropping the token and custodial wallets and a couple things that we kind of dropped in. And so I want to talk about Web3 generally. You work closely with the Parallels team, which is a TCG that's also on the Solana network, just like SoulForge Fusion. And so we have a lot of overlap there. And I would like to start with like what you viewed as the kind of what brought you to Web3, what you see as the upside and value premise for the players. If you want to touch on some of the reasons why people might feel otherwise and address those, you're welcome to. And then we can start to get into the specifics of both what you're doing with parallels and maybe we'll just bounce around on the fun ideas of what the future looks like too.
Sure. Well, I think the big pillar for Web3 is asset ownership, right? I mean, and forgive me if I sound like a broken record. I don't know how many people have come on your podcast here and talked about this concept, but I'll go through it. You know, when you played Magic when you were a kid, and it was, or actually when you play now, because people play paper Magic, but I'm so used to the digital mind. Okay, you buy your packs and you actually own your cards, right? You can sell them, you can trade them, whatever you want. You own them, right? But when we made the jump to something like Hearthstone, I have put thousands of dollars into my Hearthstone account, which I can't even legally sell because that's against Blizzard's terms of service. And so essentially, I don't really, I guess I own my account, but I can't sell or trade my cards if I wanted to. Not even from region to region, by the way. I will just point that out because that has always bothered me. Like I was not able to participate in a European tournament because all my cards were on my North American, you know, account. And so the concept is, you actually get to own your assets now at this point. And I think that is something that we've lost in time with the changes to digital. And this is blockchain's, solution to sort of get that back. So that's really like the big one, but I think that it goes far beyond that. And I am not a technical wizard, okay, but I think the concept of interoperability is really important. So being able to like share your assets from like a game to game, or there's a lot of these concepts that I think that will get expanded upon that we don't even know right now because it's still so new. But I think those are the two big pillars of blockchain gaming. And I guess, the argument is made, oh, well, you could have all of this without blockchain. And I'm like, well, who's doing that? You know what I mean? Like that's sort of my case. Like I don't think Blizzard will do that because it's not really in the best interest for them. They will make more money if people aren't able to trade their cards or sell them, right? And so I think that, the move towards blockchain having sort of this systematic, underlying tech where any of the games can build on top of and sort of share between the chain is the next evolution of gaming. And it definitely comes with its challenges. And I think that because it's the early stages, there are people taking advantage of it, and that really sucks. And have gone through moments of time where I'm quite, disheartened by what I've seen. But I also at the same time have met so many incredible game developers that really do see the vision of the technology and are good people and are working their hardest to, implement it in the best way. But the truth is that, making good games takes time. And I think making bad games that are cash grabs or whatever, like what some people have seen so far, that's much easier to do. And so the best games that are getting developed that are using blockchain tech are coming, and there's are a few that are out now. And in time, there will be more and more.
Yeah, yeah, and I want to underscore a lot of this because I agree, and like I've had this. I'm actually working on a big kind of article about this because I think it's really important that the business model that Magic the Gathering innovated and trading card games innovated was revolutionary, right? It was the first time ever that you could participate in a gaming ecosystem and that you as a player would actually capture the majority of the value, right? I could buy a pack of cards for $3.99 or whatever it is, and then open up a Black Lotus from Alpha Magic that's now worth millions of dollars. Like
Crazy.
Wizards of the Coast or Hasbro, they don't make any extra money off of that new sale. They just sold the initial packs, they brought the initial things, and the players actually were the ones that benefited. The collectors were the ones that benefited. I paid my way through college winning Magic tournaments and playing and traveling around the world doing that, right? Like the players were able to grow in a way that had never been done before. And then when these things started moving digital, it's really interesting because the very first digital trading card game, Magic Online,
Mm.
did allow you to trade cards. They did allow
Yeah.
you to trade, and then they basically, while it still sort of exists, they moved to Magic Arena and they put all their efforts behind that, where you can't sell your cards, you can't trade, just like Hearthstone, just like all these other games, where all of a sudden they've just recaptured all the value back. And so you're 100% right. Like, and we did this research on our own. Like, you can, in principle, offer a lot of the things that blockchain offers using private servers, using traditional
Mhm.
Web2 mechanisms. But these big companies are not incentivized to do it. And
Yeah.
it's very, very costly. So we internally looked at doing this for SoulForge Fusion without having to use blockchain. And it would have cost us way more money to do, would have been way more regulatory infrastructure, would have been
Sure.
much more challenging. Whereas if we, by leveraging the technology that Solana already had, we were able to build a system for players to trade and sell their decks, where we were able to build it in a few months instead of a few years. And it was like a really, really big difference for developers, because so much of the stuff is, open source, because the blockchain, all the
Yep.
stuff is there. So much can be built on. You can also leverage and connect to other communities and people that are already there. So
Yep.
as a developer, I've seen this firsthand, how much it can accelerate your process and how much you can add that value back to the community. And I think as a small game studio, that's
Mhm.
the opportunity that we have to be able to say, hey, look, we don't have the marketing budget and polish of Blizzard and Hearthstone, but what we do have is a open gaming economy and a system that you can come join, and we have a great game, and if you're a part of it, we all win together. And I think that's
Yeah.
a really compelling argument for people.
Absolutely. Like the tech, the Solana blockchain, like the tech is already there. Why not tap into it, right? That makes a ton of sense to me. But I think the important thing is not forcing people, like especially in the early days, like if they don't want to interact with the crypto stuff, like that's okay. You should give them an option to just play it like an absolutely normal game, and then if you want to tap into the ownership type of stuff, then you have that, right?
Uh,
And I think that's the important thing. And I think, we're going to see so many different games iterate on what the best model looks like. And it's really just going to take some time to figure it out. Yeah. Because, I understand the criticism of like play to earn gaming. Like a lot of people don't want that because they think it will take the fun out of gaming, right? If you're just concerned about, earning a token and that type of stuff. And so that might be true, and not every game needs to necessarily be play to earn. Maybe it's just leaning in towards asset ownership, right? And like you can't, which is kind of earning because you can sell obviously your cards or whatever it may be. But I've seen a project recently take that structure where it's like you Web 2 all the way through, and then you can eventually upgrade your card to be a digital collectible that you can sell, but there isn't necessarily like a huge token earning aspect of the game. And the truth is that some people are going to want that. Like, play to earn games are absolutely massive in Southeast Asia. Like Manila, I was just there. That's huge. And then maybe some people don't want that as well. So I think everyone is going to implement this new tech in various ways, and the truth is you'll just opt in, to the games that like the system that they choose, I suppose.
Yeah, I agree, and I think this ability of letting people opt in and creating a better, like, smoother onboarding is a big part of what we focus on here too, right? So SoulForge Fusion, we talk about it being three different pillars. You can play the tabletop game and never touch a computer and enjoy the whole experience as it is, or
Yep.
you could scan those decks into your digital account and play it as a Web2 game and never touch the blockchain, never care about the blockchain, or you can connect to the blockchain and you can now have decks that are tradable as NFTs and earn the tokens and all the things. And so every piece stands on its own, but the same collection, same cards, same core game mechanic crosses over all of them, as a way to kind of make this easier for people to come into. But I think the more important thing is, I'm keying in on something else that you said, which is like a lot of these were, it was easier to make not great games that just,
Mhm.
kind of promised tokens and had all of these like big pipe dreams and then they didn't work out. Whereas I think only recently have you seen more real game developers who, it takes time to make these games. I've been working on SoulForge Fusion for 13 years. We had over 4 years of development to get this
Wow,
version out.
13. I don't think I
Yeah.
knew that. 13 years. Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah, so the original, just to brief backstory, I'm sure a lot of our audience are listening already knows this, but the brief backstory is Richard Garfield, Creator Mass Gathering, and I met back in 2011 at a PAX Dev conference, and we started talking about what game we wanted to make next, and it was the original version of SoulForge, which came out before Hearthstone. designed specifically for mobile, was the very first
Wow.
digital card game that was designed for mobile that launched. We ran it for like 5 years, and then eventually we had to sunset that. And then as soon as that was over, I really wanted to find a way to bring it back. And it was very acute for me because the every other game I've made was mostly tabletop games, right? Like where its own downloadable game where like once you have it, you own it forever, and it doesn't matter if I stop making the game, you own it. But when
Yep.
SoulForge, the original version of SoulForge, we shut down the servers, everybody's collection was gone like the next day.
Mhm.
So people who had spent thousands of dollars or thousands of hours or like built their whole life and communities around this games, as we have, right? You did it with Hearthstone, I did it with Magic.
Mhm.
All of a sudden that was gone, and it was like heartbreaking, like one of the worst things that's ever happened to me in my whole career. And I was like, well, okay, I never want to see that happen again. And so when I started getting into blockchain and understanding, oh wait, there's a way to make this actually permanent and live on beyond my company, beyond me, beyond anything that we can do, like that was really exciting to me. And so that's part of why we started building SoulForge Fusion the way we did.
I love that. I that's the story right there. Like that's the perfect implementation of like learning about the technology, having the background story and like and moving forward with it. I love that. Thanks for I did know a little bit of the background, but I didn't know the whole thing there. So I appreciate you telling me that.
Yeah. I mean, it's fun to share. It's wild to think about when I start going back. But I think it's like, to key in on another point that you brought up, like, I think there's we don't know where the future is going for this. I think TCGs are the perfect analog, right? Because we can tell the story of like, I know what it's like to own and trade and sell a physical trading card game. NFTs and the Web3 ownership community is just like that, right? And there's, with some extra functionality thrown in. Like, but what, that's kind of a classic, taking an analog of thing we know, bringing it to the new tech world. But every new form of tech then brings its own like more native thing, right? So you mentioned the idea of having games be interoperable between or items be interoperable between games, which is,
Mhm.
kind of a Ready Player One world
Yeah.
metaverse type thing, which does feel pretty far off right now, but it's pretty exciting and compelling. Or are there other ways that like, to me, we talked about the challenges of discovery. And I think this idea that you can have a community that already exists, like on Solana, like for example, right, Parallels, great game, great community. And one of the things we did when we started SoulForge Fusion was we airdropped our token to everybody that played Parallels and had a certain amount of, their NFTs in their collection. We did the same thing for a bunch of other communities. It's like, hey, come check us out. And we can actually like give you incentives and like
Yeah.
access an already excited, already engaged community, which, there's not really a parallel for that, so to speak, in the Web 2 world that I can think
Not
of.
really.
And so it's a really interesting new way to like, again, just add value directly to players and, use that as a kind of way to onboard and bring new people into a game that might not otherwise have that audience.
Yeah. I I'm curious where you think the resistance is the most, and like I have my theories because trading card games are such a perfect use case for this new technology, right? And yeah, I have my thoughts, but I'm curious like where you think the biggest issue, like the blockage for their sort of acceptance of the technology is.
Yeah, I think and I definitely want to hear your side of this too, but I'll start because I think it is a lot of this came down to the fact that the initial entrants into the marketplace were by and large bad games and bad
Mhm.
actors,
Yeah.
right? Not always, but like it was at least one of those two for the first
Sure.
like a bunch of games that existed. And once you're in that world where you see that it's a scam and people lose everything, or it's just like the game is not fun, right? Like if you
Yeah.
come over and you see that this is a not fun thing that I'm just grinding to try to make cash, or other people are pyramid scheming to try to make cash for me, that becomes a very negative experience. And then those stories become the front of mind, and that becomes the zeitgeist, and people
Yep.
pull away. And you see even companies like that just were like throwing NFTs into their game and made no sense, or people that were that again just were more profit first, not gameplay first, not community first. And I think that became the story and the narrative. And so that I think is what pervaded, and it takes work. And again, I mean, I'm consciously putting in this work. Like when we announced that we were doing a Web3 element, we got tons of hate mail, we got tons of review bombs on our Steam game, we got tons of like lots of negativity. But I put myself out there personally. I did spaces, I did active in our Discord, I did
Yeah.
AMAs, I streamed, and I answered everybody's questions directly. And again, I've been doing this for 25 years, right? I'm not here to do a rug pull. I'm not here to scam anybody, right? And then Richard
Yep.
is on this as well, and he's been doing this for 40 years, right? Like,
Right.
so the ability ability to be upfront and put a different story, face, reality behind this, I think, is how we transition. But it takes time. It takes time to change the culture, right? And again, I'm a student of technology going back. Like the same thing happened when Blizzard started doing subscription models for World of Warcraft. People were like, "Oh my God, this is the worst!
Yep.
You can't just buy a game; you got to pay. It's a scam." Same thing happened when freemium games came out and people started having the micropayments. Right? Oh my God, it's a scam! They're just pay to win. Blah blah blah. And some cases, yes, but most cases, no. And in fact, the things that rose to the top gave you a ton of value and a ton of joy, and you could play for way less money and then invest more time and money as you saw fit. And I think the same thing is going to be true here. It's just a new technology we're still adapting to.
Yeah, amen. You hit so many points that I absolutely resonate with and agree with. And one of the things that I want to bring up is just when you have developers or even content creators. I mean, I guess it's tricky, but I was trying to say that, when you put your reputation on the line, like you've been doing this for so long, Richard, for 40 years, you said, like, what would be the reason? Or, you know what I mean? Like if there is a developer or, someone that is putting their face out there, their reputation, doing all of these interviews, hopefully that should be some kind of credibility in that, there are good people really trying, and the scammers and the bad actors are probably more anonymous, and they're hiding behind a curtain or whatever it may be. But at the same time, like obviously there have been major creators and people that are a part of scams, and they get away with it. So I think where I've relinquished a little bit, because I care so much about this industry, and so it's been very easy for me to get quite defensive with when someone attacks your character and stuff like that for being a part of this. That's been hard. But recently, this past year, I kind of sat back and I was like, you know what, the people that are coming after this technology, or they're calling you a scammer, like they think that they're doing the right thing because they're good people that don't want to see good people scammed, right? And so having a little bit more of compassion for the naysayers who don't support it, just like having the framework that they believe that they're doing the right thing, like has made me soften a little bit to being so defensive about it. And in time, my hope is just that people like you and the best or the good people that are making good games will shine through, and it will eventually show in time. But and then the other point was that there's this YouTube video, and I'll have to share it, but I think the title is like "What Went Wrong with Gaming," and you may have seen it, and it's a really great encapsulation of the greed that got built through the industry with monetization tactics, and particularly with millennials. Like they saw the whole evolution of some of the things that you mentioned there, like freemium or microtransactions or whatever it may be. And while the truth, some of the technology was good, greed also got built through those new tactics. And I think that the level of trust with gamers in our age group are just very mistrusting of new monetization tactics because of what they saw the industry move towards. And so I think they have some right and justification to be very, sus of new tactics. So I'm trying to move into the direction of having more compassion and a little less defensiveness for something that I really care about. So that's sort of been my mentality.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great little. Let me linger on this a little bit, because I think this is another thing, right? As a streamer, as a public personality, as someone who's like creating and building things and pushing at the frontier, you get a lot of hate. Like people,
Mhm.
are gonna hate, right? If you and I have my own sort of philosophy on how I deal with this and how I've approached this, right? I mean, from my early days when I started working on the Marvel and DC versus system trading card game, and had somebody posting on an online forum that I should be killed for
Oh
this
my
card design
gosh.
that I had done. I was like, okay, what? And I mean,
Okay.
it was really weird, and I had to like learn, how do I react to this? Like, how do I
That's
react that there's
brutal.
someone in the world that thinks I should die because of my card designs? Um,
Gosh,
but
I
how
hate
do
to
you how do
laugh,
you
but
deal with this? Yeah.
um, that is a work in progress. I am continually, learning how to manage that. I would say that, YouTube comments in the beginning, in the first 5 years of my career, really got to me, and they get to you when you are actually insecure about something, right? Like if someone makes a comment about you that you're like, I don't, that's dumb. I don't agree with that. It can bounce off of you a little bit easier. But when the internet can identify what you're insecure on, and then they lean into that, that's where things get tricky. But look, like I said, I'm in a process of dealing with all of that because, the last year in particular was kind of tough because Parallel started to sign Web2 creators that are very known in the TCG space. And that brought a lot of attention. And truly, like, I was kind of the first ambassador to go to my network of TCG creators and say, hey, like, try out this game and participate in this creator invitational tournament that we're, putting on. And so that definitely directed a lot of hate towards me. And it truly did make me scared and like want to run away at certain times, and having to like push through that and be okay with being seen is hard. And I think it probably just comes down to, and this is applicable I think to every aspect of life, is the judgment of others is what's actually important is the judgment of yourself, right? So if you have the confidence that you are doing the right thing, or you doing something that you believe in, it makes it a lot easier to handle other people coming at you. And if you're insecure yourself on it, that's where the voices can really, be detrimental to your mental health and stuff like that. So I'm still a work in progress handling those things, but as time has gone on, 10 years of Twitch chat, you get thicker skin as it goes. But the tricky one is when it's actually your peers. Like if it's Twitch chat or YouTube comments that are, you know, whatever, I always feel kind of bad because happy people don't usually go and leave terrible comments to people, right? You kind of have the compassion and you feel bad that someone feels the need to do that. But when it's your peers that you've known for years and years that are calling you a grifter or whatever it may be, that's a lot harder. And that definitely takes its toll for sure. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that. I appreciate the vulnerability. I think it's like really important for people to hear these things because, it's one, the insight and understanding what it takes to be a public persona in any of these cases, and that it's not all sunshine and roses and likes and follows. It is, and also that, I mean, I think it's a really deep psychological truth that you just dropped there, right? That's like this idea that like, anything that somebody can say against you, if you are comfortable with yourself and comfortable with your identity in that aspect, they can't hurt you. It rolls
Yeah.
off your back, no problem. But when you do have a reaction, when it does hit a nerve, that's actually an opportunity for you to look inward, right?
Yes.
Because it's say, hey, there's something now with me that I'm not okay. And I actually just posted an article about this like yesterday, called Urgent Revision Needed, which talks about a story that happened to me when I was working at Upper Deck, and I got one of those nasty emails from a coworker that copied my boss and was like,
Oh,
you
man.
messed this up kind of thing. And I just
Wow.
like tired and wrote my nasty email response. I got so fired up, and then I
Mm-hmm.
realized, like, wait a minute, what's happening here? Like, and I was able to kind of tell a better story, like as you've been doing with your audience, of saying, hey, look, I could be compassionate, that anybody that's going to take the time to write an angry, Twitch post or YouTube comment or email or whatever, they really care about whatever it is that you're doing, right? And there's
Yeah.
probably a lot more pain and suffering going on in their life that you could have compassion for, and then you can take that opportunity to look inward. Okay, wait, is there any truth to this? Is there anything that I don't feel comfortable with, and how do I resolve that for myself? That's like a very powerful way to show up in the world that
Yeah.
you've identified on, and I think everybody can benefit from it. So I try, anytime I get fired up, my rule is like, if I get emotionally charged in something and somebody's like not in physical danger, then that says more about me than it does about anything going on in the world, and that
So
gives me an
true.
opportunity to reflect.
Yeah, no, I love the way that you phrased it. It's an opportunity, right? To really look inside yourself and be like, why am I so triggered by this? And the truth is that some people are gonna just say mean things, and it is what it is. But yeah, having cultivating that like inner peace and dealing with emotional triggers, like it is absolutely the opportunity for self growth. Doing that in a public forum or public space is hard, but everyone has. It's not just content creators or people that have platforms. Like everybody is faced with these issues, and yeah, no, I love the way I will look at that article too. I'm excited to read that as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think that the value of the ability for you to be able to put yourself out there, face criticism and rejection and failure in public is one of the most important skills you can cultivate to achieve your dreams. Like
Yeah.
full stop. Right. Like I teach game design through this podcast, through my book, through a live course, and it's the number one skill I try to impart to people. Like you will try things and they are not going to work. And you need to take criticism and feedback and separate your ego from it and look at where you can learn and then be able to grow from that. And if you can do that and you keep working and you can learn and grow from criticism, you could accomplish anything. And if you can't do that, you're always going to hit a wall and you're never going to get outside your comfort zone and you're going to be stuck wherever that discomfort or insecurity
Yeah.
lies.
Amen. I think humility is also super important because the truth is like we're going to make mistakes. And I sort of had a moment earlier this year where I did have like on Twitter a defensive response to something, and the better avenue or course of action would have just been to be a little like show a little bit more humility and be like, oh, okay, I was kind of wrong in this situation, right? And that was actually sort of a catalyst point of like, you know what, I think that the world is also moving towards authenticity. Like I don't know if you feel this, but I feel like the traditional kind of Kardashian type celebrity where it's all buttoned up is getting less popular, and people are really loving seeing real people on TikTok talking about their struggles and whatever it may be. So I think that, just having the vulnerability, and it's scary because when you are vulnerable with the internet, then they can pick up what you're insecure on, right? But I do think it goes a long way because everyone, struggles with these types of things. And if you're just like, hey, like I made a mistake here and I'm gonna work and be better and try to separate my ego from things, as you just said. So yeah, love that.
Yeah, yeah, easier said than done, but definitely a work in
Yes.
progress for all of us, and very, important and powerful. And again, that vulnerability and admitting to your mistakes and being open about those experiences and the hardships is helps make you more relatable, helps make the
Yeah.
message more resonant, right? Like if you just like, oh yeah, I'm right all the time, everything goes great, I'm super awesome, like okay, cool, thanks, but like that's not, I can't relate to that. But if you could tell me like, hey, actually, I really struggled here. I really messed up here. We almost went bankrupt here. I had this relationship fail here. I did this other thing go. Like, oh, okay, cool. Like now I get it. Now you've got something that you can teach me that I can relate to because it's not all sunshine and roses.
Exactly. Even with game developers, with making changes to a card, nerfing it or whatever it may be, if the messaging to the community is, "Hey, we tried this and we made a mistake," I feel like the community is way more like, "Oh, okay, thanks for letting us know." But if you're just like doubling down, like, no, this is great, it doesn't sit right with the gamers in the community. So, yeah, it's applicable to all facets of life.
So I want to use this as a jumping off point because you mentioned this importance of being able to be vulnerable and let your audience know when you've messed up. And I think that listening to your community is such a critical part of it. Being able to build a good community and build a game. I don't think always agreeing with the community is right, but I do think
Sure.
making sure that they feel heard and they understand your reasoning when you're making things happen. How do you think about community building, and what best practices do you think make the most sense? And you can use either your streaming community, you can use, let's say, something like Parallels, which has been working to build a community in Web3 and bring other people
Yeah.
over, or you can even use it if you'd like as a, advice you'd give to me is building now a new nascent Web3 community for Soulful Fusion.
Yeah, I mean, I think community is the lifeblood of any game, and I guess I can go over a few examples. So I think that Parallel does this well, and I'm going to also use TFT, Team Fight Tactics, as an example with Mort Dog. When it comes from the game side of things, I think having a having your devs sort of be a personality. Like, I just think Mort Dog does this so well in TFT. Like, he streams himself, but he's very communicative on Twitter. He'll respond to people. I think having the dev team, not everybody needs to be a public person, but the dev team being on Twitter, responding to people, like there being that personal element is so important, in my opinion. And so I think like parallel with Koji, like kind of Fitch, having personalities that interact with the community is really crucial. So that would definitely be advice that I've seen that has worked really well. And when it comes to a content creator, I mean, I guess you can create community in any way. There's so many different ways to do it. I mean, I recently just watched all three Back to the Futures for the first time, and I did movie nights in my Discord. And, there's probably only like 20-25 people in there, but it was always a meme that I hadn't seen Back to the Future. And so we all watched it together and, gave our input and stuff like that. I think that live streaming builds a sense of connection that you don't quite get in any other format. Like, your regulars coming to your stream and communicating with them, saying, hey, blah, 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 like, oh, how was your thing that you told me about? Like, trying to remember. Obviously, that falls off if you have 50,000 people watching you. But it's those types of things that really build a connection to the individual, and people keep coming back. And, I'm sure many of you have heard of the 1,000 true fans, that type of, that's the,
Yep.
what you should be going for. But yes, I think there's many different ways to do it. Like I said, that was sort of the logic for building Alchemy, was giving people a way to interact with each other and have fun beyond just the main game that they're playing, or the NFT community that they were in, or whatever it may be. So I think having a Discord, making sure you're active in there, super important. Just a place where people can ask questions, having key figures that are very communicative with the community, and yeah, just creating fun events for people to join into. I think those three things that are coming to mind right now. And if I think of any else, I'll let you
No,
know.
that's great. And I love this, like this, there's other 1,000 True Fans is the article by Kevin Kelly. Highly recommend everybody read it if they haven't already. It's a great, innovation that, in the internet world, you can really just like build super fans and build a very powerful niche community.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that there's that building personal relationships and events and things that don't even necessarily scale to, if I want to have 1 million viewers or whatever, but it's like those core fans become the seeds for those later things. They're the ones that will tell their friends. They're the ones that'll be there all the time and
Absolutely.
support you when you jump from one new venture to another, and so for, when I've, went from doing tabletop games to digital games, or digital games to the Web3 games, or, trying to write a book and teach design, or now I have a new book that I just sent off to the editor that takes the principles of games and apply them to like business and life, and like how do you use those things there, which is, it's a jump, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I know that I've, invested in a core group of fans and people who found value in my work that are willing to come along for the ride, and that hopefully will find value in the new thing. And so I think no matter how big your audience gets or how long you've been doing this, I think it never, not losing sight of that, like, personal touch and fun little events and quirky ways to just kind of be you and do the things that, only you can do, because that's just who
Absolutely.
you are, right? I think it's such a key part, whether it be a dev that's in the public forums and your own personality. I think, in a sense, you're not just selling whatever the product is you're selling like who you are. Like whenever you create something, part of you has to be involved in that to make it feel authentic, to make it resonate with people. And I think that's comes through in a lot of your work personally, and one of the reasons I was excited to get to talk to you, and
Yeah.
in the many great tips you've given here. So thank you.
Authenticity is peak right now. And yeah, I think that there are some games in the space that, I mean, I won't name names, but it feels colder. Like I don't see as much interaction, or it feels like a company behind a thing, and or a curtain. And the accessibility, the gamers, the community being heard is just so important. So yeah, I I think that's all very important.
I love it. All right. Well, I think we're low on time today, although I'm quite confident this will not be the last time we have a conversation like this. But for those that want to follow your stuff and see all the cool things you're doing, what's the best place for them to come find you or find your cool projects and streams, etc.?
Sounds good. My X or Twitter, what I don't know what we're calling, if we're calling it X,
whatever
at this
you want
point,
to call it.
Okay,
Yeah.
pretty much all of my stuff is at Alliestrasza. So Alliestrasza. So that'll be my Twitter, my YouTube, my Twitch stream. If you put that into the search functionality, you will definitely find me. And yes, I'm incredibly enthusiastic to come back on and probably talk a little bit more about Soulforge Fusion, because I've only just started playing it, doing the campaign and that type of thing. And I just want to say before we end this podcast that I really like it. There's so many things about the game that are awesome, and I'm looking forward to getting more into it, being more competitive. So I just wanted to throw that in there, that I think you've made a really cool game thus far. So,
well, I appreciate that very much. I'll tell you what, I would love to just do a dedicated episode or interaction or something around Soulforge Fusion, because it means a lot to me, especially with your background and you're exactly the kind of person I'm trying to appeal to with this game. So
yes.
If we're hitting the target, that's fantastic. Yeah. And since you're plugging your stuff, I'll plug mine for anybody that wants to. Soulforge Fusion, free to download. You can go find it on Steam, SOLFORGEFUSION.com. Also finds all the cool stuff. So here we are, all promoting the cool things we're making. But yeah, this is so much fun, Allie. I knew I was going to enjoy this conversation. I absolutely did, and I can't wait till next time.
Thank you for having me on. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. If you want to support the podcast, please rate, comment, and share on your favorite podcast platforms, such as iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever device you're listening on. Listener reviews and shares make a huge difference and help us grow this community, and will allow me to bring more amazing guests and insights to you. I've taken the insights from these interviews, along with my 20 years of experience in the game industry, and compressed it all into a book with the same title as this podcast, Think Like a Game Designer. In it, I give step-by-step instructions on how to apply the lessons from these great designers and bring your own games to life. If you think you might be interested, you can check out the book at thinklikeagamedesigner.com or wherever fine books are sold.